Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Jerry Cuomo here. And today I'm going to be talking about APIs and how this API economy is really transforming our industry and really is the fuel. The APIs are the building blocks for mobile and for fueling the innovation that we see happening rapidly within our industry. And as it says here, the API economy has changed how developers think about building apps and also about how organizations deploy their software in the cloud. In fact, everywhere you look on the web these days, it seems that someone's launching a new API. In fact, there's over 10,000 APIs documented as we speak on programmable web today. And as we continue to speak, it's significantly growing. Participating in the API economy is really about kickstarting new innovation. For developers, whether you're a software developer or heck, even a business developer, it's about composing new apps that sprinkle your good idea and are enforced by the best innovation that the industry has to offer. So think about it. Think about examples out there. If any of you, I know recently in San Francisco, I used an Uber cab and used the Uber mobile app. Um, from an innovation perspective, their core competency is taxis, or at least transportation, but maps and all of the things, payments. Uber doesn't have to worry about that. They can get to focused on their core competency. And I'll be mentioning uh, from a enterprise perspective, Expedia recently launched a new developer program and has significantly driven business, new channels of business through their new developer APIs. So let's look at this a little bit closer. The two forces powering the API economy, and this is really about the API provider and API consumer. So let's start by looking at an example. It's a somewhat fabricated example, but if you've used Cars.com's mobile app, you might imagine that Cars.com is a consumer of the API economy. And you can imagine Cars.com consuming APIs and assembling their Cars.com app with several third-party APIs together with their own technology to form the base of their app. For example, as you can see here, they are using a map provider API to provide store locator functions, APIs for a car dealer data aggregator for availability of certain models and makes. They use APIs from a bank to offer loans, calculators, doing loan origination, auto insurance from an insurance company's API, and you can imagine using IBM's new Xtify push location notification service API from IBM, notifying you that a car that you were looking for is now found. All right, so that's Cars.com focusing on innovating, leveraging the best of the industry, bringing their own idea to market very quickly, and that's the consumer side. Now, the um, benefits could go on for Cars.com. They can, as I said, focus on their core competency and add value rather than reinventing the wheel. Common capabilities out there. They see quicker time to market, decrease cost, and speed up the Cars.com app development and delivery. Also drives innovation, and it's this kind of 1+1 = 3, putting together the innovation that they have plus the best in the industry. So perhaps adding the notifications that I talked about from Xtify on top of this car finder scenario is a form of innovative way to get closer to your customers. And perhaps the insurance company actually offers value to their affiliates by promoting the users of their insurance API. So maybe there's a new channel of promotion for Cars.com through the insurance company. All right, so that's the benefits for the consumer. Now, let's look at the provider side. Let's pick out one of the providers here. Let's say the bank. So from API economy, the provider perspective, the bank can extend its reach to beyond its brick and mortar customers, beyond its online banking customers by offering APIs like what you're seeing here, mortgage calculators, loan origination, online payments, and account query, that the bank can reach new mobile app providers like automotive sales, Cars.com, online realtors, perhaps Zillow.com, and personal finance data aggregators like Mint, which, again, benefits, expands into new customer bases that the bank may not have had, in niche areas that a bank normally would not reach. Let's say like you know real estate or the like. Expands their brand and brand loyalty. You think about how really Google and their Map API, that's very well known, as an excellent provider of mapping services. So perhaps you can think of the bank as, there's a bank's signature mortgage calculator would be as equivalent to, you know, uh, Google's Map API. And now you have third parties innovating with your content, with your bank content, in ways perhaps you haven't imagined. And you are now monetizing those sources as a provider across a wide variety um, of platforms. All right, now let's look at, I've described the principles behind the API economy, principles being the balance of innovation between the API producer and consumer. Now, let's look at the life cycle. Let's look at the interactions between the consumers and producers. So the life cycle, perhaps it can start in any of these places, but let's say for today it starts with the enterprise, the provider, providing and exposing, liberating assets that are internal, making it their public persona. Assets like data, functionality, compute resources, leading to, as you can see, wider reach beyond your traditional business, facilitating open innovation with external parties and new or extended sources of revenue, which we saw in our examples earlier. So that kind of starts this life cycle. But now that plus everyone else doing it, right? So you plus the masses publishing. Now you've created an economy. And as I said, the number of private and public APIs is growing exponentially. And I mentioned programmable web. The expectation for growth is like 30,000 by 2016 of APIs. But another thing is that for every API that you see, there's some significant numbers of what we're calling dark APIs, ones that are not publicly exposed, growing at about a 5x rate to the open APIs. And I'm drawn to some statements that Jeff Bezos from Amazon said, which is he edict inside Amazon that the way they communicate both internally and externally to customers and partners are through services and APIs. And I really like that. I really like that idea. And you can imagine the number of dark APIs within Amazon. And heck, I know for a fact inside IBM, we have many internal APIs powering all sorts of internal systems. Now let's talk about the developers. The developers now are greeted with this wealth of third-party innovation. So the developers really are looking to rent more code. The best code written in the cloud these days is the code you rent, and you rent it in the form of APIs. But now it's really about developers needing environments to compose applications from existing systems and APIs to create this new value. So tools and environments, and we'll talk about those in a second, that help you assemble applications, help you assemble and aggregate services is really the new demand of tooling from developers. Remember, a developer in this API economy in a mobile-led world, mobile-first world, needs to get their applications out quickly. And they want to do that because these applications tend to be customer-centric, user-centric, and you have an opportunity to get to know your end user more intimately. And you're not going to get that right on the first time. So iterating is going to be key. So this notion of composition, running these apps in the cloud, being lean and agile, and continuously delivering, continuously testing is key. The other fact here that I'm seeing more and more is that apps typically use between 5 and a dozen third-party APIs. And again, I mentioned, the best code written on the cloud is the code that you didn't write, you actually rented. And but when you think about it, if your app now has 5 to 12 new links in it, so your chain has 5 new links, you're typically as strong as your weakest link. So are any of these 5 to 12 links your weak link. And I think this is both the interesting part of the economy and the part as you rapidly build these apps. You'll see rich function in the apps. I think we have a need to manage these APIs. And this is where I think API management will start to come in. We'll talk about that in a second. The user. The user of these apps have some expectations. And one of the expectations is to work in context of the app and not jump around. And this is really going to drive integration of APIs. Think about the fact that you're working on you're working inside an app. You don't want to have to go to another app to pay or another app to see the location. You want to see that on a map, and you want that to that experience to be seamless. And I think the users have a demand for a seamless, crisp and clear experience. And I think again, API economy plays into that very well and enables that level of integration through API integration. Last but not least, now that the business is reaching out in channels that it hasn't reached out likely before, banks reaching out to real estate, to car companies, to personal finance, you get to see a variety of new customers and their behavior of how they interact with your services. And with that insight gained, you can optimize your business for these new channels, to expand it, to continue to grow loyalty, and to continue to grow revenue and transactions. All right, so that's kind of the life cycle in a nutshell. So if you step back and think about how you might start to use this information, in IBM, we're starting to think about what are the patterns for API providers and what are the patterns for API consumers. So in a nutshell here, you see some of the strategy work around design patterns. For providers, it starts with design. Design your API as a business. APIs need to be as beautiful as any other part of your user experience, and they need to be as beautiful as your user interface, well structured, balanced. All of these things, easy to use. All of these things are key when designing your API. Again, it's less of a technical, although technical design matters here, but it's a business design. What are you trying to get your end users to do? What sort of innovation are you trying to enable from the third party? Extending your business, looking at the channels that you can reach, driving efficiency around transacting. Remember, you don't want your best day that you've opened up new channels to be a bad day because you're not ready to handle the additional load and transactions, the additional requirements around security. So that's an important part of the design, how to transact efficiently. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the cherry on top of this provider design is to optimize. Optimize based on the insights gained from the use of your APIs. On the consumer side, the design pattern is connect, assemble, enhance, and iterate. It's about this iterative process. It's about composition and assembly. It's about being able to understand based on what you learn to quickly iterate on the designs. As I said, using your innovation, but you're standing on the shoulders of giants now. You can innovate by consuming and connecting to some of the best sources of innovation in the world. I mentioned maps, payment systems like PayPal. You don't have to reinvent those wheels. You can focus on your core competency, assemble, enhance based on your core competency, and continue that consumer kind of pattern around quick, iterative, lean development. All right, so the opportunity here. I think as we look at this, the opportunity for IBM and our customers is really to enable playing in the API economy as both providers and consumers. And specifically what I mean here is on the provider side. Well, first of all, in IBM, we have lots of APIs that we are bringing to the table. And bringing them together in a consistent, known place, I think, is an important part of the opportunity here. The other part of the opportunity is to work with our customers and partners, third parties, to help them liberate their APIs and design beautiful APIs for the world to consume. I think then on the other side, on the consumer side, we have an opportunity to enable developers from you know developing new businesses. I talked about Uber and some of those other examples, but also various levels of developers. Everything from inpatient mobile developers to advanced technology developers. And in the middle, the forces between the providers and consumers, finding a place for them to convene and to meet, I think is an important part of defining the API economy. So kind of roughly that's the opportunity. So our strategy falls out onto the same canvas. When you look at the strategy both from a services and data assets for the API providers, and then enabling applications to be built on the right for API consumers. So we have a variety of APIs on the IBM side, from our industry solutions, our SaaS properties, Unica Core Metrics, Connexa, many interesting solutions from a API perspective. Domain-specific solutions. We have Watson, cognitive computing. We have analytics capabilities, mobile, bringing those to the table. We have foundational services and APIs that we're bringing around caching, messaging, storage, business rules, deep data services around SQL, NoSQL, Hadoop, working with third parties of various sorts and helping integrate third-party APIs through cloud integration. That'll be a topic of a whole nother article or video article coming up. Also, helping customers manage their API strategy. That's a key part of what we're aiming to do. On the right side, there's various levels. There's the programming platform, composition with accessing APIs through SDKs around Node.js, Java, of course, Python, etc., focusing on cloud and mobile developers. So a compositional platform where we have a piece of work going on called Bluemix that's utilizing Cloud Foundry as this compositional platform. And then API composition more from the business-led perspective. So focusing on business data and analytics, visual composition of tools, focus on rapid assembly of processes based on APIs. So that's the other area that we're focusing on, some higher level API composition tools. And of course, strategy around API consumption. How do you actually manage the risk of using APIs with API management, cost optimization, regulatory concerns, etc. Anyway, folks, in a nutshell, this was our view of the API economy, a little bit about what it is and what we all in IBM are doing about it. So please stay tuned. And this is Jerry Cuomo. Thanks for joining me.